Hello everyone and welcome to a Vision F1 League Racing video. Now before we jump into the main purpose of the video, which is the highlight of round 4, which is around Imola, I just wanted to take this moment to quickly explain on how this league format works. So we currently use the 2025 Formula 1 Alpine model designed by Racing Studios. Now a fun difference between the Formula 1 games and this is that you have complete clean canvas of your team that you are driving for. So it's not an official team. You pick your team name, your livery, with your teammate. I must also add that the calendar as well, which I'll pop up a picture now, is by no means a normal calendar. It's got a couple of tracks on there that you don't see Formula 1 at anymore, but make it a bit fun, a bit interesting. So yeah, it is a little bit of trial and error. We do have some modern tracks that we still drive at that the normal Formula 1 calendar use. So yeah, it's not complete chaos. So just before we jump into the previous results and the previous rounds, be sure to like, comment, subscribe. It means a lot, and I'll be posting more videos like this every Sunday. We're going to fly through these previous results. Round 1 was around Barcelona. Qualified P6, finished P5 after a few mistakes. With a time penalty that luckily didn't concede us any further. Our teammate finished P1, which got us off to a good start in the Constructors' title race. We won it last season, so this season is our defence. Now let's jump to round 2, which is around Kielami in South Africa, which wasn't a very liked track. It was good fun, had a bit of a better race this time, finished P2. And it was actually P3 on the track, but we got given P2 because of penalties. So we're now P4 in the Drivers' Championship and still leading the Constructors' Championship quite healthily after our teammate won yet again. So let's jump on board for our first run in qualifying. So we want to make sure we're using the overtake button to use as much battery as we can down the straights to get higher top speed. DRS open. We're going to head over to the right hand side of the track to open up the first chicane as best as possible. Trail the brakes in, using the curve where we can without unsettling the car too much, onto the second back straight. Here we want to focus on carrying as much speed into the entry of the chicane without again unsettling the car, using all the curve on the exit and braking just after the 50-metre board, tucking it in for this hairpin before heading up the hill. Back on the overtake button to give us as much speed up the hill as possible, looking for the 50-metre board, braking just after it, throwing it into this left-hander, using the curve on the exit, heading down to this tricky double right-hand. Nearly fly over the first apex, want to trail it into the second one whilst using again as much of the exit curve as possible, heading up to the next braking zone. We're looking between the 100 and the 50-metre braking board, throwing it over the 2 yellow sausage curbs, wide on the exit curve, just nearly touching track limits, heading down towards the penultimate double left-hander. Penultimate corner braking just before the 50-metre board, downhill braking, difficult to get the car stopped, exit curve, throw it into the last corner, giving us the best run up to the start-finish straight, making sure it hit DRS as soon as possible, last bit of battery usage, and our time is going to be a 1:15.605, quite a big margin off of P1 for now. Let's jump on board for our fastest run in qualifying. So let's see how this compares to our previous lap. Let's see if we can improve. DRS open, on the overtake button to deploy as much of that battery as we can. We're looking over to the meter boards on the right hand side. We're going to be braking just after the 100 meters, throwing it into the left, throwing it into the right, nice and cleanly through the first chicane, not losing any time, gaining slightly. This time we're going to be braking as we're turning into the first apex, hitting the right hand curve as much as we can, using that exit again, braking just after the 50-metre board, making the most out of trail braking, coming out of turn 7 to give the car the best rotation possible. Heading up the hill now to turn 9, level on our delta currently, but there is a lot of time to find in this middle sector. Again, we're going to try and go flat out into turn 11, just lifting slightly, clipping the grass into the entry of turn 12, but still getting a good exit as we head now to the tricky chicane of turn 14 and 15, braking a bit later, again throwing it over them yellow sausage curbs. Not as wide on the exit, but still gaining time. 2 and a bit tenths now as we head down the hill for the last 2 corners. Braking just a bit later this time into turn 18, hitting the apex nicely, lining ourselves up for the last corner straight back on the overtake button to deploy the last amount of battery that we've got left. We pick the shortest run to the line as we are 0.34 tenths up, which means our time will be a 1:15.288. Still a big margin to P1, but a big improvement nonetheless. Okay, let's jump to the grid for the start of the race. We've opted for the C4 tyre to start, which I think most of the grid have done the same, which means we'll be going to the C1 for a second stint. We haven't had the best of luck for the start, so we wait for the 6 red lights to go out. And we are off for the Imola Grand Prix, and we get a pretty terrible start yet again, instantly being overtaken to P2 by our teammate, and we already have P3 nearly being compromised, so we're just going to minimise the damage, try not get any contact through this first chicane, as we then manage to keep the position for now as we look to try and defend the position, but also try and get through this first lap in one piece, maybe even look to try and jump to P2 and build up that pace that we know we've got in the locker, keeping it nice and tight to the apex, not to give any room for a dive bomb, as he gets a good exit out of that hairpin and he's looking to our inside of the turn 9. We're going to leave some racing room there, but also make sure to carry enough speed so that we don't lose out too much, and again just trying to make sure we get through this first lap happy and damage free, as it's not always been the case, and try and build up some gap behind and start to make some inroads into our teammate and Malone in P1 and see how we get on. So as we head towards the end of the first lap into turn 18 and 19, we've closed the gap a bit to P1 and P2. We hit the grass on the exit at the last corner, but so does Gal behind us, who has a bit more of a moment, which gives us a bit of breathing space heading into the second lap, as we are losing a bit of time down the straights, but we are trying to harvest some battery to make sure that we don't use the entire deployment straight away.
Overshot that.
Teammate, as you heard, overshot turn 1 to turn 2, which means if we quickly fast forward through this second lap, we do start to gain a lot of time, as our confidence is growing every corner as we bet ourselves into this race. As we focus now on the end of the second lap, our teammate did say to us that he is not going to give us a hard time as we try and overtake him on the start-finish straight. Not using any battery to give us a clean and easy overtake, but also then deploying the battery to make sure that he doesn't compromise himself too much and potentially lose out to Gower behind, as we now move into P2 and focus straight ahead at Malone to try and close the gap to P1. We're going to jump now to lap 5 of this race, and we have indeed closed the gap quite significantly down to P1, which means we're just trying to use as much battery as we can so that we can get in his DRS, which means he'll pull us along nicely. As we zoom in, we do in fact get within the second just before this lap starts, which will give us DRS down the start-finish straight, which means we can probably not go for an overtake yet, but it means that we could save some battery and not have to worry too much about him pulling away, which would remove any chance of us really winning this race, which is probably our best chance so far. We've had some podiums. We would really like a win if there is an opportunity. We're going to jump now to lap 10, and we are still within the DRS. We haven't really attempted an overtake yet or trouble them too much, but we are actually going to dive into the pits and put the C1 tyre on. Now, C1 tyre is a great race tyre, and we are going to try the undercut here as well on the loan to see whether that's a possibility. Overtaking is possible here, but I just think if we can get ahead and really get our pace up and running, we might have a chance to pull away in this race. As I do feel as though if I can get ahead, I might be able to pull a gap, as I do feel like my pace is quite strong, especially was in this race anyway. So we're looking over to the left-hand side on the track map to see where we're going to slot back into this race, and we're looking to ideally get some clean air for our outlap to give our best chances of the undercut, and we are just going to get ahead of P6 into P5, which gives us that ideal clean air for our outlap, making sure to push on as much as possible. So we are now approaching the end of our outlap. We're looking to the right hand side of the pit exit. Unfortunately, we did not complete the undercut, and we are now slotting back into P2. But however, the positive here is that we have the temperature in our tyres, we've warmed them up nicely so we have a good strong pace. Roman's obviously just come out of the pit, so he's going to be on cool tyres, so now is probably our best chance to push on. As you can see, I'm going a bit wide into turn 7. And as I'm noticing this happening, I'm thinking this might be my best chance to push for an overtake. I'm already thinking I might just, keep it clean, keep it tidy, try and force them into a mistake, and then just try and ensure that I get a good exit out of the last corner and line up an overtake into turn 1, which is like probably the most favoured overtaking spot on this track. Obviously you've got a really long straight, so you can deploy all the battery, not all of it, but some of it, using obviously DRS to give ourselves the best chance of a clean overtake. As we hit the last corner now, we do get a good exit. One actually runs a little bit wide, getting a little bit loose out of the last corner. So we're going to push on now into the slipstream, into the DRS, using the overtake. It defends the inside, so we're going to go to the outside, leaves us just enough room. We're going to leave a bit of racing room on the inside as he's still there, but we do make a nice clean overtake which slots us into P1 for the first time in this race. So we're just going to obviously focus now on pushing on, seeing if we can break that 1 second gap before the next lap starts, which is going to be very difficult, but now that is quite a key factor in this race, as this is sort of obviously my first chance now of trying to build a gap, keep the position, but it does turn into a bit of a cagey tactical battle as the race does progress, as you will see. Head up towards now turn 14 and 15 on lap 13. We are struggling just a bit to pull out any more gap, 0.75 ahead, which, as you can see, we're pushing on, using the battery, using the overtake as we're heading towards the DRS detection line. And unfortunately we aren't able to break that 1 second gap, which means he will be in our DRS as we start lap 14 of this race. Unsure whether or not he's going to go for an overtake. I don't think he's close enough, so we're just going to sort of take a normal racing line, not too worried about potentially throwing it down the inside into turn 1. As we jump now to the end of lap 14, we are getting a bit happy on the throttle on the exits of these corners, which is going to sort of compromise us going down the start-finish straight heading into lap 15, which means I believe Malone will have seen all that going on, and he's going to go for a move at the inside. Don't defend it too much, because we kind of seen it coming with the bit of radical driving that we were doing before the lap start. So we also then don't want to fight too hard and make a mistake, potentially damaging both of our cars, ending both of our races. So we just sort of slot back into P2 for now. So jump forward a bit in the race here to the hairpin of turn 7. We're going to get a good exit here. The flashing red light in the back of Malone's car, meaning that he's harvesting his battery, is part of the tactical battle that I touched on earlier, as we do try quite a risky move going into turn 9, but we sensibly back off. Was that he was saving it a lot in the middle sector to try and get me into the dirty air. Then as we got to the end of the middle sector, he used the overtake to build a gap, and then he also used it on the start finish straight to create enough gap to try and stop me from going for an overtake. But obviously we realised this and we kept pushing on, and we're going to go for another overtake around the outside of turn 1, which I quite like that move, but we don't actually get the move completely finished. Get really close into turn 2, making sure we both leave each other enough racing room. It's a nice clean battle, as he's looking to try and force me into a mistake into the second chicane. I'm not phased by that, so we're just going to keep our heads down and try and keep the position for as long as we can. We're going to jump towards the end of the same lap as we're actually approaching a back marker and get a bit loose out of the tight chicane at the top of the hill. We get past the back marker as it moves out of the way for the blue flags, frustrating me not close enough so that we can use the DRS from the back marker, so we are actually going to end up being compromised going into the next lap. So if we have a look in our virtual mirror, Malone is closing and closing and closing, and he's going for yet another move up the inside of the turn 1. very nicely done. We're not going to defend it too hard because we don't want yet again to compromise ourselves too much. Going towards the latter stages of this race, sort of just want to keep it clean, keep it tidy, keep fighting on, sort of maybe look to defend a bit harder towards the end of this race when it matters. Lap 27 now of this race, and it's quite an important lap as we're about to find out that a safety car has been deployed. Now, I did find this a little bit frustrating because I felt as though my tyres were really strong still, and Malone's were looking, from my perspective anyway, that they were starting to lose out a little bit towards the last stages of this race, which means we're all going to be bunched up, we're all going to be on the C5 as I suspect. However, as I dove into the pits, I didn't quite realise, but I found out after the race that Malone had put the C4 tyre on. Now, I think this was because he thought maybe that the C5 wouldn't last the remaining laps of this race in terms of degradation. However, I've put the C5s on because I was a bit like, you know, there's what? Maybe it's just like just a handful of laps left. We're on 28 now, so there's always going to be 1 or 2 laps into the safety car, so the tyres are only going to be pushed for maybe 2 laps at the most. Let's jump now to the safety car restart, and we're just going to sort of wait and see how early is Malone going to go, and he's launched very early indeed. It's caught most of us napping as we head down towards the last 2 corners.
No, you don't use DRS.
As you can hear there, our teammates say don't use DRS, as even though it does give us the beep, we have to manually understand that we can't use it for the first lap after the safety car has gone in. So like I said, we haven't got DRS this lap, but we are going to use some of our battery just to make sure that we do stay within 1 second, so that when we can actually use DRS, we are able to try and go for an overtake to win this race. Our tyres are really nicely warmed up, and as I explained before, Malone went for the C4 compounder tyre, which is obviously a bit of a harder tyre, and also then harder to get into the right window to be able to push and have the same pace. So even though I feel as though our pace was a little bit quicker anyway, we've now got quite a big advantage. So we're just going to look to make the most of that as we head through the middle sector.
You can use it this lap.
We're going to try and push in, get close enough to go for a move on the next lap. As you might have heard, a teammate just said there that we can use DRS this lap. Now, I don't know whether he was meant to say it that way, but I think we both might have misunderstood that the DRS line where you activate it is actually before the start finish line. And like I explained before, this is still the first lap since the safety car has gone in. So that is obviously going to affect our end race result, as you'll find out. So I have activated it there, which is the rules of the rules. We don't actually end up going for a move. Malone does move over to the inside to defend any chance of that, but we do back off and have a little bit of moment out of the out of the first chicane. Nothing too bad though. As you say, the tyres are so much quicker at the moment than Malone's C4s, so we're just gonna stay in touch and look to line up a move going on to the last lap, which is a better idea than overtaking on the previous one, because it is a lot harder to overtake anywhere else on this track, whether it be you could maybe go for a move heading into the chicane of turn 14 and 15 if you do get a really good run out of this corner, but it's never really worth the risk, as you can't really, if you do end up going side by side into the chicane, it's never going to end too well. So we are just looking to get as close as we can to Malone before we head down the start finish straight onto the last lap. He does get away from us a little bit, but he does run quite wide heading into the last corner, and we just have more grip than he does. Smart the DRS on, exhaust all of that battery with the overtake button, and we're going to go to the outside. We're actually going to run on the grass on the outside there. Luckily we managed to get it back onto pavement before we hit the brakes, which if we hadn't have done that, it would have ended very ugly indeed. But we are through into P1, heading through the last lap, which means we are on course to win this race, which will be massive, especially considering we actually didn't finish in Jeddah, which was pretty difficult to take on the chin. So we're actually now as we look in the virtual mirror, Malone pushing really hard to try and get back in touch with us, but he ends up making a little mistake after we come through this section in the middle sector. Up the hill he has a massive moment, running onto the grass a little bit, which gives our teammate a bit of a sniff to potentially get into P2, but he doesn't go for the move. And we are now heading towards the end of this race, and we're pretty much scot-free, just trying to keep it clean, keep it tidy, not make any mistakes. We're actually really early on the brakes there, just making sure that we actually get it across the line to finish this race in P1, which would have been the perfect way to wrap up this race, but as we explained before, as I'll show in the results on the screen now, that that wasn't the case, which means we did pick up a 3-second penalty because of that DRS activation that was too early, which does drop us to P3, but hopefully we'll come back fighting stronger in Silverstone, which is the next round, which will be round 5. So P3 is still a good result from the race, still a podium. It's just a tough pill to swallow after fighting so hard to win that race, but it does put us in quite a, still a good spot in the championship. Maybe he's not able to fight for P1 or P2, but it's joint P3 now, and our home race in Silverstone should be a good one. I do feel quite confident after that, knowing that I can fight 4 wins and podiums. So yeah, we'll see you in the next one. Thank you for watching.